Hello, everyone. My name is Rafael Vigil, and I'd like to welcome everyone to my Headshot Photography podcast. Today, I have special guest Barbara MacFerrin. She's amazing portrait and headshot photographer, and yeah, we've been planning this for quite some time. And yeah, I'm super excited to have you on the podcast because I have a million questions to you. As I said, your work is extremely inspiring. I've been checking your work constantly and try to kind of figure out some of those stuff what you do. But I hope you kind of gave us some secrets today. So let's start with. I just want to kind of know a little bit. I tried to find some of your bio and kind of see where you're coming from. I found you live in Colorado,
Mhm.
um, and but there's not much more. I've seen you've got so many awards. There's a lot of interesting stuff. But please tell me a little bit more about your path into photography. How this whole thing started. It seems like you've been doing this for quite some time. So how this whole thing started for you?
Okay, well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it. And maybe I'm a little bit of a mystery, huh? There's not a lot of information out there. So basically, I started photography first as a hobby when I was 17 years old. My father was a photographer,
Okay.
and his father, so my grandfather, my uncles, they were all either
Oh wow.
photographers or artists. And I was actually born in Argentina, and
Oh wow.
we
Okay.
my
Congratulations on the winning.
yes, thank you. That was very exciting. Um, so yeah, my dad's side of the family, some of them were from Italy and some from Argentina, and um, and my father's father and brothers had a lab or a photography studio in Argentina. So they were pretty well known in the town that I was born in. And eventually, when they came to the United States, their photography was more about printing. So they
Mhm.
printed photography for other photographers. And when I was 17, my dad gave me a camera for my birthday. It was a Minolta X370 35 millimeter camera. And I basically fell in love with photography at that time. And I took pictures of everything, mainly of the beautiful mountains in Colorado. This is where
Mm.
I've lived for most of my life. So, yeah, it was just a hobby basically. So in my career, I worked in IT. So not
Okay.
very exciting. So I was a computer, um, I did computer support for many years. And yeah, and on the side as a hobby was photography. And eventually, when my daughter was born in 2014, I just did not want to do that work anymore. And I just tried to figure out how can I use photography as a career. And so I slowly started watching, like Creative Live, like different
Mm.
um, videos on how to start a business, a photography business. And I thought, well, I need to start photographing people because you can't really sell pictures of trees and mountains. I mean, it can, but it's kind of hard to make a living doing that.
Right.
So I started photographing portraits in around 2016, and
Mhm.
then that's just kind of how it started. And I would ever since then just refining my style, and I knew that I wanted to be different because where I live there's many photographers shooting portraits, weddings and seniors and whatnot, but I wanted to be different and I wanted to have my own style.
Mhm.
And I that's just when I started with the fine art portraits and wanting them to look like paintings,
Mm.
because that's just the style that I love. So that's what I went with, and that's kind of how it started.
Perfect. So tell me a little bit about your. Let's jump into like we're gonna go deep into this.
Mhm.
About your style. Like, can you tell me a little bit about um how this style kind of came to existence? Like, did
Mhm.
you kind of started right away with fine art, or it was just like a process for you? And then how
Mhm.
does process kind of develop over the years? Like, I'm sure when you look back at your work from, I don't know, 5 6 years ago,
Mhm.
probably looks a little bit different what is looking right now.
Mhm.
So can you tell me, like, did you study like a history of art, or that was something would just kind of come naturally to you, that that was the directions you were going?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I actually do not have a formal training in art, or photography for that matter. I guess I always think maybe it was just in my genes because my dad and his whole family were artists and photographers. They could draw and paint very well, but I can't draw and paint very well.
Hmm.
So for me, it was just the inspiration came from looking at old master paintings
Hmm.
when I was younger. My dad, he loved to paint in that style as well, and he liked to look at that type of artwork. So I remember looking at that type of artwork with him, through books and museums and things. So that was just kind of resonated with me and just always stuck with me, and it's always very inspiring to me. So when I decided to start photographing portraits, I just automatically, that's where my brain went. Like, this is what I want my portraits to look like. I want them to look like paintings since I can't paint. That becomes my sort of canvas. And then it also sets me apart from, other photographers in the area because you don't see that style very much, at least not around here.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, so I just started just trying to learn, okay, how do I light like that? So just practicing with
Hmm.
lighting, maybe I don't know, watching various videos, going to various workshops, and just picking up tidbits here and there of, how can I do this better? How can I finesse it? But I always started that way. When I started using strobes in the studio, that's just
Hmm.
where I started. I didn't really do any other type of photography.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Yeah, it's kind of fascinating that, there's like, in my case, I went through like 10 years of shooting weddings. That was my starting point. And then mostly
Mm-hmm.
because, there's a lot of money into it. So you just like drawn into this because you have to make a living and you have to pay the bills, buy equipment and all this stuff. And then slowly,
Right.
gradually, I started kind of navigating towards like, headshots and portraits. But it's kind of cool that you were able to go directly into portrait photography. So
Mm-hmm.
tell me, who inspires you as a photographer? Like, I know from my even own experience that we kind of like looking what other people's do, and as you said, like
Mm-hmm.
we just picking up bits and pieces here and
Mm-hmm.
there and try to create
Yeah.
own style, right? Like, just molding this whole thing over the years. So when you started shooting portrait, like there was any specific photographers who inspired you, and
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of help you to build your
Mm-hmm.
own style?
Yeah, I've there's several, like Joel Grimes.
Mhm.
I love his work, and I've listened to him speak. He's very inspiring. Chris Knight,
Okay.
Lin, Lindsay Adler, Dmitry Bave. He's a Ukrainian photographer.
Mhm.
Hemi Val Benedict from the Netherlands. Um, yeah, Richard Wood
Mhm.
from New Zealand. So yeah, and then again, the paintings from the old masters. That's
Mhm.
where I drew a lot of my inspiration. So yeah, just looking through. I mean, Instagram and Pinterest are just
Yeah.
one, great, sources of inspiration. Just kind of putting in the words you want to find, like fine art, and then just seeing so many beautiful images, and you just kind of maybe
Mhm.
not a particular photographer, but maybe some images might inspire creativity and just getting ideas. So yeah.
Perfect.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
tell me a little bit more about, like, well, we talk a little about the how this style developed, but
Hmm.
let's kind of focus right now on individual images. So how this whole thing works on your end? Let's say you have a client, or I don't know, you doing some creative portrait session, whatever.
Hmm.
Um, so do you kind of go with the flow, or you have some kind of concept in place, or where you're creating a mood board, and then you have some stuff put together that, okay, this is the direction I'm gonna go. How does process look like? So, because like based on looking at your images, I don't see there is some kind of coincidence. There, everything is planned out. Everything is kind of like, put together really professionally and precisely, and then you just kind of going to kind of get the shot. So
Hmm.
would you tell me a little bit about that process?
Sure. Actually, it's a little bit of everything. To be honest, actually, I don't pre-plan a lot of my
Okay.
shoots. Um, so there's a difference. So if I have a client, for example, who's paying to have a session, of course, there's going to be a little bit more planning with wardrobe with the client, and I do like pre-consultations, and so I'd like to know ahead of time, what kind of wardrobe are they bringing, what can I contribute. Usually, though, the the client sessions are not as creative as my own personal sessions. So they're usually like, a family portrait,
Mhm.
in that painterly style with, maybe a wardrobe that they purchased or maybe something that I have on hand. But so that's basically how a client session works. The
Mhm.
personal and creative ones, uh, a few times that I have had a concept in mind and then I sort of pre-plan it as we go. But honestly, I create on the go
Okay.
as as the what we've seen the moment, I guess. So
Mhm.
I might have a vague idea in the beginning, or perhaps I have a prop that I want to photograph,
Mhm.
and a new hairpiece or a new dress or something, and I say, okay, I want to shoot this dress. Who can I find to wear it? And then while we're getting ready and doing hair and makeup, it's really very much in the moment. Like,
Mhm.
my hair and makeup artist will ask me, okay, how do you want their hair to look? And I just look at them and I look at, okay, do this. Or,
Yeah.
I want it up or down or whatever. So yeah, it's really, well, most of it, I would say the majority of my work is on, just
On the
goes
go.
with the flow. And
Yeah.
then in post processing is kind of again in the flow, like, okay, I cull my images, I find the one that really speaks to me, and then I start editing, and then I maybe start adding things to it, or you know in the color toning, everything just kind of starts to happen. Like, what do I want? How do I want it to look? What looks good? What doesn't? And that's just how I create. So I'm not very good at coming up with ideas in the beginning, other than just a vague, okay, I want to do this maybe, but I don't know exactly how it's going to look.
Well,
So,
you know what, and I work exactly the same way,
mhm,
which is interesting because I deeply believe that sometimes you cannot really predict some of those
mhm,
things. You have to kind of
right,
see how this whole thing is gonna look like when you're shooting, and
mhm,
like depends on the subject. There's so many
right,
variables, which
yeah,
kind of like it's hard to like, oh, this is what I'm gonna go after. And I
mhm,
think it's
yeah,
good to have that kind of flexibility because I
mhm,
kind of witnessed some photographers who like they were going bunkers because they had this idea and the idea didn't work, and
right,
they have a hard time to kind of mold it kind of different ways, so there was something
mhm,
out of this which they were happy with. They're just like,
right,
okay, if it's not working, they upset, right? But now, like,
yeah,
the way it seemed like you were working, we just kind of like a little bit like a fish in the water. We're trying to kind of navigate it to get best
mhm.
out of it, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and that's the thing is, I don't want to have something so concrete in my mind, and then if it doesn't work out, then what? I'm disappointed or something. So I'd rather just kind of see what we can do in the moment, because a lot of times, even the model you're working with, maybe, if you've never worked with them before,
Mhm.
perhaps you don't know, what kind of expressions they can give you until they're warmed up, and then they produce something for you that you're like, wow, this is something that I wasn't expecting, and then it's great. So yeah, it's very much
Yeah.
just create in the moment, and that's what's fun for
So
me.
what's your ratio doing like a regular work, what you're getting paid? Because the one thing what I want to also point it out when you said about the own personal and creative work you do, it's kind of interesting that people want to see it, but they do not necessarily want to pay for it and be part of it, right? So they see
Hmm.
those images and they're like, oh my God, this is so cool. But let's do just the regular portraits, right? For the
Hmm.
family. They don't want to kind
Right,
of go overboard and create
right,
something which would really stand out. So like I
right.
feel that all the time. Like they see the work,
Hmm.
like, oh, this is so cool, but I'm gonna stay far away from this. So
Exactly.
what is your ratio? Like, how much like do you focus more on your personal work, or is just kind of like, I know it's hard to keep it balanced, and I'm
Hmm.
guessing based on my own experience that those creative ones, they gave us a little bit more joy. I don't know how you feel about it.
Oh
Um,
yeah. For sure. Yeah, the creative work is much more fun because I can do whatever I want. um, so I would say as my business has progressed, of course,
mhm,
when I first started, most of it was client work.
mhm,
Um, and then as I got better with my retouching and my creative photography was increasing, then I was getting a lot more requests for teaching.
mhm,
So now I would say my business is probably 50-50. Maybe 50% is teaching, 50% is client work. So when I teach, then that's when I'm getting a lot more of my creative work because
mhm,
I'm producing creative work while I'm teaching students,
mhm,
because they want to learn that style. And so it's kind of a win-win. I can do a creative shoot while I'm teaching.
mhm,
So yeah, it's about half and half right now. And yes, I do get clients that say, "Oh, I love your work, and I want to get some headshots, or I want to get some,
mhm,
family portraits." But they they kind of, okay, this is what I want to wear. I don't want to go crazy. So I'm like, okay, that's fine. So they're paying you that you give them what they want, obviously, but my work is still retouched in a
mhm,
similar fine art style, so they're still getting that sort of you know heirloom old
mhm.
master style of a painted type of a photograph that they can put on the wall. So and interestingly enough, I don't know, in where I live, some people, that's just not their style. They would rather have the cliche, picture outside with the mountains in the background because
Mhm.
they love to be outside. So a lot of people I run into prefer the outdoor photos, in the mountains or in a park or something like that. And that's not really what I do. So, I mean, I'll do some of those, but that's not what my
But I think
specialty.
it's everywhere, right? Like I
Yeah.
think doesn't matter because I'm originally from Poland, and then
Hmm.
like, I've done some work over there, and it's exactly the same thing. Like
Hmm.
even though, as I said, they like specific style and they reach out to you because they've seen some really artistic image,
Hmm.
but at the same time, they want to go to the park and then have just
Right.
the regular photos, which is okay.
Yeah.
As you said, they
Yeah.
pay for it, they pay the bill,
Yeah.
we pay the
Yeah.
bills, so
Exactly.
at the end of the day, it's all good. But it's very, very, I would say, small percentage of people who really want to push
Hmm.
those images to
It
completely
it really is. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I've
But
had
it's
a
interesting
few,
because
yeah,
you
a
have that
handful.
ability,
Hmm.
right? But do you have a lot of clients who just came in and they like, you know what, I'm gonna give myself into your hands and then just do whatever, or that was just like this is really rare for you?
I've had a few clients say, I want you to do, almost whatever you want. They have their limits, but yeah, I've had a few clients, and those are the best ones because you
Yeah.
have creative freedom, and there's not very much expectation of and they usually they love it. So
Hmm.
yeah, there's a few, the brave ones that that are really open to that. So yeah. Mm,
Absolutely. So
yeah.
I want to kind of talk a little bit about the retouching process, but before we do that, I just want to talk to you about, so what is kind of ideal portrait for you? Like, what's the description? Like, how you basically see the images? Okay, okay, this is the perfect portrait. Like, how you describe
Mm,
that?
mhm. So for me, I would say number one is the lighting,
Hmm.
um, and the expression,
Hmm.
and and basically the lighting and the expression are I guess the main thing. And then having a bit of a story in there is always great. And then the wardrobe and how it all ties in together with the backgrounds. I don't usually use a lot of busy props, and my portraits are fairly simple. I don't usually have like a lot of elements, so it's usually just the background, the subject,
Hmm.
maybe one small prop, and that's it. So I would say it comes down to the lighting and the expression are probably the main points that I look for. Hmm. Hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's jump into the Photoshop because the
Hmm.
Photoshop these days is a huge part of photography, and
Hmm.
the kind of statements I've been hearing that I want to have my images looks great straight from the camera. Like I think that's just a myth.
Hmm.
Uh, so there is definitely a process into it. So tell me a little bit about. Well, first of all, I want to talk about like how you developed your retouching style, like because it's beautiful. You have this
Thank you.
really unique and distinctive style of retouching your images. So I want to kind of dive in a little bit,
Hmm.
because the one thing what I want to point it out, and this is also like directed to the audience, because people think, and I'm sure you as a teacher you probably heard that people want to learn retouching overnight, like they're gonna take a
Mm.
course, on Friday, on a Monday, you're going to be like masters in retouching. But this stuff
Right.
takes a lot of practice, a lot of
Yeah.
time, training your eye, just doing
Hmm.
mistakes over and over again until you get to the okay. Now I feel like okay, I can
Hmm.
kind of feel this, right?
Hmm.
So can you tell me a little bit about your process getting into the point where you are right now?
Yeah. So, oh, I don't even remember how I started, but so in the beginning, I watched, like YouTube, like
Hmm.
how do you, I don't know, take away blemishes. So
Hmm.
it's always been like a process and steps and like layers, right? You learn something, you do it for a while, and then you're like, okay, well, I could improve this. And then maybe you learn a little tip from somewhere and then you incorporate that. And then, oh, okay, this is working better. So I can't say exactly like linear because it's
Yeah,
always
yeah, yeah.
been jumping around and trying different things. But in general, the lighting for me has to be very soft, has to be,
Mhm.
um, you know, there's a certain, um, what am I trying to say? So for me, I have to have those shadows, right, to get that
Mhm.
depth, the fine art feel. So there needs to be shadows, and a lot of photographers are actually afraid of having shadows. So
Yeah.
I want to make sure I have shadows, but they also need to be soft to get that look. So that's part of it. So the lighting is very much probably 80% of
Mhm.
getting the image. The final image has to be the lighting, has to be the right way. So and then the processing, I would say in Photoshop, 90% of getting it to look like that is dodge and burn.
Mhm.
Um, so that's the majority, and that's what has taken so long to master because you do have to train your eye for dodge and burn, and it takes it. I don't know. It just takes so much time to get it right
So there's no
because you can.
shortcuts, right? That's one
No,
thing.
there's no, there's no action. There's no preset for dodge and burn. It's everything's custom, and every image is individually done. So it's like painting, like I said before. And when you paint a painting, even if you paint three paintings in a row, they're not going to look exactly the same. So it's the same for my photography. So yeah, dodge and burn, and then a little bit of color toning, and if you think about it, the main idea is to bring light to where you want it and to
Mhm.
take light away where you don't want it.
Yeah.
So for me, if you look at all my images, most of the light is on the face.
Mhm.
So I try to light initially in studio, bring most of the light is on the face, and then the rest of the image is a little bit darker.
Mhm.
And in Photoshop, I just enhance that. I bring more light to the face and make the rest a little bit darker. And what's interesting is nowadays you have cameras that are so sharp and
Mhm.
so like crisp. For me, I actually prefer a little bit softer. So I usually shoot with a higher depth of field, a low
Mhm.
aperture. So because I like that softness
Mhm.
overall, and I actually prefer a little bit of grain in my images. So I actually add grain to my final images in Photoshop. Um, and it just creates this little bit of, I don't know, like a film soft look.
Paintings.
Um, yeah, and it's interesting because photographers will spend thousands of dollars on these expensive cameras that have no noise,
Yeah.
but actually I prefer it. So yeah, I mean that's really what it is dodge and burn, some grain, some color toning, and I mean it's not that simple, but when you really break it down, that's all I'm doing really, and just using frequency separation to really, get the blemishes,
Mhm.
out of, and get that softness. And it's really what it comes down to,
Absolutely.
honestly. Yeah.
And it's also interesting that the stuff what you just said, that like we want to have images to be grainy a little bit, and
Hmm.
don't be as perfect, and then
Hmm.
you're hearing all this testing for lenses and cameras, and this
Hmm.
lens is not sharp enough, which, like,
Hmm.
these days most of those lenses, they're extremely sharp, like, you
Hmm.
just pull out the image. And even when I sometimes retouch my headshots, and you can see every vein in the eyes, and just like
Hmm.
it's just clear and perfect,
Yeah.
and it's just like, wow, it's
Yeah.
just amazing, how good we got with the
Oh,
equipment.
yeah. Hmm.
So let's switch the gears and let's talk a little bit about your equipment. Like, I
Hmm.
know a lot of photographers, they, well, that's what they want to hear, right? Like, what
Hmm.
equipment you use, what
Right.
lighting you use. So can you tell me a little bit about your setup, your camera, like what you're using, and do
Hmm.
you have any kind of preferable, let's say, lenses or lighting? Because I know those things also kind of develop over the years. Like, we testing
Hmm.
different things, and then like, oh, this is kind of
Right.
do the job the way I like it. So what's your favorite
Hmm.
pieces of the gear which you're using
Yeah.
constantly?
Yeah, the one thing I want to emphasize is there is no need to buy really expensive lights, expensive equipment to create something like this, because I've been using the same camera for the last 6 years, and it's a Nikon D750, so it's not, the latest and greatest. It's an older camera, but it does what I need it to do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my favorite go-to lens is either the Nikon 50 millimeter or the 85 millimeter. In studio, I prefer the 85 because it is a nice sharp lens. I mean, I want sharpness for the eyes, especially. I want them to be in focus. So the 85 gives me nice depth of field, nice focus. Um, and then the 50 is nice in case I need to, get a full body shot or something like that. And I don't have a lot of space in the studio I use, so I can't really go with like a 105 or a 200 millimeter or something like that. So typically 50 or 85 is what I go with. And then lights, I'm using Westcott FJ 400 strobes. Um, I would say 80 to 90% of my work is two lights. So I have a main light and a fill light that I use. And my
Mm-hmm.
modifiers are usually the 7-foot diffused umbrella for my fill, which is also Westcott, and either a 41-inch uh, diffused umbrella or a 53-inch diffused umbrella for the main light. Every once in a while, I'll use a beauty dish to get just even more, just focus on the face, and a little bit, if I want a little bit of a harder light. Um, and sometimes I'll use a gridded 40, or not a gridded, I'm sorry, a 48-inch deep softbox,
Mm-hmm.
octabox. So it just kind of depends on what I'm shooting. So I might switch around my modifier a little bit, but in general, yeah, my go-to are the umbrellas, because they just produce a nice soft light for any situation. And what else? I mean, that's mainly what I use as far as lighting. I don't typically use like a strip box or a rim light.
Mm-hmm.
Every once in a while for a headshot, I will. I'll use a
Mm-hmm.
third light as a rim light, but my creative projects, I usually don't use a third light.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I mean it's pretty simple.
Yeah.
that's about it. Yeah. Yeah, I
Perfect.
would
So.
say. Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, yeah. There's no need for really expensive equipment, but I will say that I was honored by Hasselblad a few months ago. They reached out to me and allowed me to test one of their cameras.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I will say, shooting with that camera was amazing. And yes, the image quality was like not even close to what I'm used to. Um, but still, you could still create beautiful images with any camera. Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
yes, if you have a really nice expensive camera, you can get more sharpness, more detail. But yeah, you could still work with what you have. Mm.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm still using the Nikon D800 for like
Mm-hmm.
decades. And then
Mm-hmm.
it's like I had the shutter replaced once, so like was
Right.
already went through major kind of repairs, but it's
Yeah.
still running. So
Yeah.
I'm just hoping it's gonna die at some point because you're getting all these forces for them going for the mirrorless, cameras. Like, but
Yes. Yes.
it's again, it's something that, and I think also for the portrait photography, right? Like we're not working at the, I don't know, sports fields where you have to have
Mm-hmm.
super fast
Right.
autofocus and all this stuff. Like I think,
Right.
like just a little story which I went through, which was kind of fascinating, because
Mm-hmm.
when I was shooting weddings with the digital era, like there's no limits, right? So you're just
Mm-hmm.
shooting like crazy just so you can get the shot.
Right.
And I came with the same, I would say, attitude and the same kind of habit to shoot portraits and headshots. And I was ending up with like 1,000 images, and I'm just like, what the hell I'm doing, right? But like
Yeah.
it's this habit which you have, like, oh, I'm gonna get the shot, and
Right.
then at some point I had to just like going completely opposite direction and
Mm-hmm.
slow the process down,
Slow
right? Just
down. Yeah.
shoot slower and just change
Right.
the poses, change the face expressions, like just
Mm-hmm.
really put the big break on everything what I was doing. So this
Mm-hmm.
is another thing that I think it's important to mention, that we're going and we're buying this equipment, and then we're getting this salesperson who is telling us like, oh, this is like super fast autofocus. Like we really don't need that, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
something that
Yeah.
it's not necessary, especially for portrait photography.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
Yeah. A
So
lot
I'm
of
gonna, yeah. Sorry.
I was going to say a lot of photographers get caught up in equipment, right? You just keep
Yes.
wanting to buy more and more equipment. But I feel like, yes, slowing down and just finessing what you're doing will give you better results
Mhm.
than buying a better camera, because
Yeah.
ultimately it's who's behind the camera who, that
Crazy.
makes, the image, right?
Absolutely. And I
Mm-hmm.
think we're also living in that kind of era where, everyone trying to sell you something, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then I think
Right.
what happened, like I'm sure you remember back in the days where, the new cameras that were coming out every 2, 3 years. Now we have what, once a year or even
Yes.
like quicker. And
Kind
those
of like the
companies,
new phones.
yeah,
Kind
exactly. It's
of like
it's the
that.
same thing, and I think it's just kind of like speed up the process, right? That
Right.
like
Oh
there's
yeah.
always something newer. By the time like even you start really using and feel the camera, there's another one, right? Which is
Right.
like has something
Right.
new to offer,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And I think getting to know your equipment and really spending a lot of time with it, and getting and really mastering it is what what will make you a better photographer.
So let's jump into this Hasselblad story. I want to hear a little bit
Oh,
more.
sure.
Can you tell me like what was the major difference you've noticed, like with when you shoot your Nikon or shooting
Hmm.
Hasselblad? I know that the files are probably bigger. That's the kind of
Hmm.
the first thing. So you get
Yeah.
get much bigger access to, like, I don't know, to retouching those images. But there
Hmm.
was any other difference which you
Hmm.
kind of really noticed, like, oh wow, that's just make a huge difference for my images.
Yeah. So the camera I tested was the 50 megapixel, the
Hmm.
X1D. And yeah, so it's about twice as many megapixels. My Nikon is, I believe, 24, and then this was a 50. So that right there was a big difference. The biggest difference I noticed was when I brought the images into Photoshop. Right away, I noticed the color profile. Hasselblad has their own proprietary color space, and
Hmm.
it's just an amazing color space, and I can't even explain it, but it really benefits the skin tones. So,
Hmm.
there was actually almost less retouching I had to do in Photoshop because the skin tones came out so beautiful already.
Oh wow.
I noticed with my Nikon. Now I don't have much experience shooting with Canon, but with my Nikon and specifically, I feel like the colors come out a little bit more magenta
Hmm.
in the skin, so I feel like I'm constantly having to tone down the reds and the magentas in the skin. Um, but with the Hasselblad, it was, I was shooting with the same lights. Pretty much everything was the same. So yeah, definitely the color space was amazing, and then just the sharpness and the detail was beautiful. So yeah, that
Yeah.
was the main difference. And it took a little while. I mean, I was able to borrow the camera for about a month, so it took me a little
Okay.
while to figure out how to use it. And it was mirrorless, which I'm not used to, and just trying to find the focal points, and it had some little things that I was like, how do you do this? How do you do that? So, having to learn how to use the camera. But once, I got the hang of it and got more consistent results, yeah, it was really
Yeah.
quite beautiful. And yeah, I'd love to get my hands on one someday, but
Yeah. Well, they should give it to you.
I
And
know that'd be nice. That would be nice. We'll
well, the
see.
work you produce, I think they would
Thank
just
you.
take a huge advantage to showing
Hopefully
people
they'll
what
Yeah,
cameras are
hopefully
capable
they'll
of.
watch your video and then maybe that'll convince them.
Yes, yes, I will tell them,
Thank you.
do the right thing.
Yeah. Well, what
Especially,
prompted it is I had a front cover professional photographer magazine in the UK. One of their issues had one of my images on the front cover, and they did an interview. And they saw one of their reps saw the cover, and they were interested, and they reached out. So that was really nice. It's very wonderful.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
a nice treat, I think, just to
yeah,
kind of get the feel of it, right?
yeah, for sure.
Perfect. So let's go a little bit back. I just have a kind of couple questions, and then what I would like to do, I would like to jump into kind of showing some of your work, and then we can kind
Hmm.
of talk a little bit about, behind the scenes, how the image kind of come to the existence, and you can tell a little bit of story. Because
Hmm.
I know, and this is what is the most frustrating for me. I don't know if you feel the same way, because we see the image, it's beautiful. We like typically people don't spend too much time, but there's always much broader story behind it. Like
Hmm.
there's how you created this image, how you come up this idea, how you got this concept, how you execute this whole thing. And I'm always interested in those stories because that gives you a little bit more understanding how the
Hmm.
image come to the existence. But we're gonna
Hmm.
get there in a second.
Sure.
So tell me a little bit more about like one of the biggest mistakes you've done, which you kind of, I'm sure you've learned from them, but
Mhm.
if you could go back to the beginning of your career, which was the mistakes you wish you wouldn't do it?
Hmm. I see. I know I've made mistakes. I mean, well, you were just talking about, I don't know if it's a mistake, but you were talking about shooting a lot of images. And yeah, I think slowing down was something I had to learn to do, because I think even as a even though I didn't do weddings or sports photography, just I think being a new or fairly new photographer, you I think I feel like it's almost a habit to just you know shoot a lot in hopes that one of these is going to turn out right. um, so I learned and had to learn to slow down. Also, in the business of taking portraits of people, is looking at the details before you snap the shutter. So, for example, wrinkles in the clothing or hair, some hairs in the face. That's one of my biggest things that now I don't. It was a big mistake to not come up to the client
Fix it.
and move their hair out of their face, or just little details. Just stop and look, and it's okay to come up to the client and ask, can I touch your shirt, can I fix this or that, because it will save you so much time in Photoshop. And I wasted so many hours early on in Photoshop trying to fix these little things that could have easily been taken care of before you click the shutter. So yeah, I would say those types of things were definitely learning points for me. um, Also, just you know, for me, it was, like I said earlier, it was a hobby to start with, but I wished now that I had started of looking at making photography a business sooner,
Mhm. Okay.
because it took so many years for me to finally get there. But I just didn't think I could make a living doing photography then. So I was doing something I really didn't enjoy for a paycheck.
Mhm.
So that's one thing I wished I had done sooner, is actually start
Mhm.
the business sooner in my career than I did.
Absolutely.
Um,
And I think a lot of people don't understand, and like I think it's photography is really specific business because I 100% agree with what you just said. It takes time to build
mhm,
your business, right?
mhm,
Because I think if you have any other business, like I know there's different types of business, but there's some businesses you have the product, you pushing, you do marketing, and then you just selling stuff, right?
Right.
Where photography, like it takes years and years and years to, build
Hmm.
your portfolio, to kind of build your clientele, to kind of,
Hmm.
do the proper marketing. And also we're living in the crazy world where everything is changing constantly. And then
Hmm.
that's the thing is so challenging because, as you said, like, you want to create some your personal work, and clients, they don't kind of going for this type of work. We have to do some other stuff which just kind of like keep the balance in the process. And then, I deeply believe, and 100% agree with you, that it just
Hmm.
takes so much time to, and you have to start early to kind of,
Hmm.
build this
Yeah.
solid foundation where you can just kind of make a living out of this. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And also even age. I mean, I'm not getting any younger, but I see young photographers in their 20s and 30s, the energy levels that you need to have, especially
Yes.
to do weddings or sports or anything that requires you to, you're moving all the time, and you need just this energy. And
Hmm.
as we get older, that energy kind of
Yes.
and
And
I
you
can
know what?
feel it,
Yeah. And I feel beat up. Like, I have some sessions
Yes.
sometimes when you're just shooting for 2 3 hours and then you're done and you just like feel like you just run marathon
Oh
or
yeah.
something. And I think it's
Oh.
also like, it's not even the physical, but it's mental gain too, right? Because you have to
Hmm.
constantly
Right.
focus and think. And then, when you said
Right.
about this hair, oh, like, like you have things where you have on the face and you have to spend
Yeah.
time in Photoshop. But that's something what we learn also from retouching, right? Because if you have this
Hmm.
beautiful image and you have this like one piece of hair going through the eye, and
Oh yeah.
next time, like, you're becoming this like a freak where you just like
Yes. Yes.
paying
Yep.
attention to every little detail, right?
Right.
So, but that also
Right.
takes time, I think, to learn this
Yeah.
stuff, right?
Oh, for sure. You learn from your mistakes, for sure. Yeah.
Yes,
Yep.
absolutely.
Yep. And also, in like you said, the mental, you know, you have to be on, talking to your clients, and for people like me, I'm very introverted,
Hmm.
and if I talk a lot, it exhausts me.
Hmm.
I'm so tired. So yeah, after a session, I'm just, or a workshop, if I'm teaching, I'm just ready to go to bed. I'm
Yeah,
just tired, physically and emotionally. It just drains me, but I love it.
yes,
But yeah, it takes a lot out of me, but I do
yeah.
enjoy it.
I always say that, photography, especially this the type of photography like you do, or like my photography, is also extremely addictive. I don't know if you have that
Hmm.
feeling. Sometimes you create something, you're so happy, you're so proud of it, and you want more. Like, oh, I want to get
Yes.
into the next project because I want to create more of it and get that amazing
Hmm.
feeling. So
Hmm. Either that, or you want to edit until 2 or 3 in the morning. You just want to
yes,
keep. Going.
yes, yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're losing time. Yeah, 100%. Sometimes when you
Yeah.
get into this retouching process, the time kind of disappeared,
Oh
and
yeah.
it's like, okay,
Yeah.
what happened within the
When you're
last
in your
2 hours?
zone. So it's just like, an artist painting on a can. Same thing. You just kind of get in the zone, and you don't notice anything else. You're just, doing that, and yeah,
There's a
that's when
specific
it's
word
just,
for it. I think it's a flow state or something that you
yeah,
completely lose kind of
yeah,
touch
yeah.
with reality.
You're in the flow. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It's great.
absolutely.
Hmm.
Perfect. Okay, so I think this is the right time to jump into some of your images.
Thank you.
As I said, I dive into your Instagram, your website. So I pull out some images. I'm going to bring them up right now.
All right.
And so I would like to basically just discuss a little bit of story, how the image comes to existence, what inspired you. Like, those images are extremely creative. They have this amazing well, just the process itself is fascinating. So I would like to hear a little bit of more story about some of them. We don't have to go through all of them, but I would love
Hmm.
to. But let's see how it goes. And so this is
Sure.
what was one of my favorite images, which I saw on your Instagram. It's just
Hmm. Thank
breathtaking.
you.
And if you could just tell me a little bit of story.
Yeah. So this one was one of the images that I did have some, obviously, some planning to
Hmm.
do. Had been thinking of an image like this for a while. I wanted to create. Um, well, first of all, this model, her name is Brienne. She's amazing, and I've worked with her several times on other
Okay.
creative projects. And I thought, she would make a perfect tree. And I just, in my mind, wanted to create someone that looked like a tree. I believe I came across an image or a painting at some point. I can't even remember who did it, but it was on Pinterest, I believe. And it was a girl who was kind of had leaves all over her and was kind of dressed like a tree. So I thought, well, I want to, I'd love to do something like that. 'Cause I love nature and I love to be around trees. So and I'm also a bit of an environmentalist, about climate change. And I thought, that would be kind of cool. So I collaborated with Brienne and excuse me, my hair and makeup artist. Her name is Teresa, and she's since working with me, she's made some really beautiful headpieces.
Mm-hmm.
And so I asked her, do you think you can create a headpiece with leaves and trees and maybe like even horns, for this
Mm-hmm.
a concept that we could come up with? And she said, sure. So she scoured, online and to look at inspiration. So she came up with this headpiece, just, hot glue and rope. The horns were made with rope that she
Mm-hmm.
just twisted. And yeah, and then she brought this headpiece. I thought this is amazing. Then it kind of went from there, right? I had this vague idea of creating a tree, and so now we have this headpiece. And I said, okay, now let's get pieces of moss and leaves to
Mm-hmm.
paste on to the model. So during the shoot day, it took us 3 hours to glue all this stuff on Brienne. And yeah, and then basically when I looked at her and I said, okay, I think we have enough tree stuff on you. Let's just, get in front of the camera. I had a backdrop that had some like a forest background, and then I just started shooting, and that's just kind of how it came to be. Um, and then based on her pose, she's kind of holding her belly. She actually was not pregnant, but it kind of looks like a
Yeah.
maternity shoot. So I named it Mother Earth, um, just from her pose.
Mm-hmm.
And then in post processing, same thing. Doing dodging and burning. I also use a lot of textures
Mm-hmm.
in my post processing, like texture overlays, to create more interest and depth in the photo. And in this image, I did add texture to her skin to make it look like kind of like bark and dirt
Mm-hmm.
um, on her skin. And then I did use, it looks like light rays coming down. That was actually from a plugin that I used, just like a light ray texture. But yeah, other than that, it was all, in camera and then the processing. So, nothing photoshopped in terms of the leaves. They were all stuck on her. So, so yeah.
Perfect. That's really masterpiece.
Thank you.
Yeah, really,
Yeah, that's one
really.
of my favorites too. It was really fun to come up with and fun to do for all of us. And it was one of my more, I guess, complicated ones where, we spent so much time, and I normally we don't spend that much time putting makeup on, but 3 hours and then really shooting, I shot for maybe 30 minutes. So I thought, wow,
Yeah,
3 hours to prepare and then just shoot for 20 or 30 minutes.
yeah,
It was pretty interesting. Yeah.
yeah. People don't realize the preparation, how much that
Hmm.
takes, and it's also like
Yeah.
I think it's hard for the model and it's hard for the photographer because
Oh,
like
yeah.
you're constantly just looking and analyzing and then making sure that everything looks the way it's supposed to. So yeah,
Yeah.
but it's at the end of the day, you create something like this and you're proud the rest of your life,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So I think
This
that
was
the
a
3 hours.
Yeah, it was a collaboration with another hair and makeup artist. Her name's Jessica. She did most of the makeup. Teresa
Mhm.
did the hair piece and the hair, and then yeah, and then we all just kind of helped
Yeah,
glue leaves on her. Yeah, yeah,
perfect.
it was fun.
Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
let's jump into more simple image.
Mm-hmm.
So if you tell me, I
Yeah,
so this is more of a headshot with some creative twist to it.
mm-hmm.
If you could tell me a little bit about the story, there's amazing
Yeah.
headpiece. It seems like you've been using very very interesting wardrobe for your your shoots? Like you're really particular about what they're wearing and stuff like that. Headpieces,
Well,
especially, right?
yeah, actually, this was, and I really credit this to, again, Teresa, my hair and makeup artist.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have, the skill to make these headpieces. She made
Mm-hmm.
this again just from just ideas. We were talking and just getting inspiration online, and then she went to town. She got the lace. She got, actually, that head is made with paper. I forgot what she's called it. There's a term that you curl little paper strips and they're all glued
Mm-hmm.
on the hat there. So I credit all that to her. She made that. This was actually a model who came in during a workshop I was teaching. And I had a little pink dress that I thought, hey, that would match the hat.
Mm-hmm.
Put that on, and then Teresa did her hair, and that's really it. It was pretty simple. I just came in. I wanted to get a nice close shot of her beautiful eyes and the hat. For me, the wardrobe and the hat was more important than what she was wearing, so that's why I came in close. Um, yeah, and that's really it. There's not a
Yeah.
whole lot to it. The editing was a little different. I did give it more of like a matte kind of finish,
Mm-hmm.
and a little bit of a cooler tone. And that's where I kind of go back and forth. Some of my earlier work was warmer, and
Mm-hmm.
then I kind of switched and made my images look a little cooler, and then I kind of go
Mm-hmm.
back and forth and just try to find something in between.
Yeah.
Um, and it also has some texture overlays to kind of give it a little bit more of a, I
Mm-hmm.
don't know, a texture feel.
Absolutely. And
Mm-hmm.
there's one thing which kind of like I know I'm going to go back what you've said a little bit earlier about magenta in Nikon color profile because I feel exactly the same. Like it's just
Mm-hmm.
kind of interesting that I see there's a lot of reds.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to kind of remove it, and I never thought about it. And then when
Mm-hmm.
you said that, I'm just like all of a sudden I get this click in my head, like yeah, I'm dealing with the same kind of maybe not. It's not an
Yeah.
issue, but
Yeah.
you can really kind of notice that, right?
Yeah, and I find in raw, camera raw, I'm always yeah, reducing the reds in the skin,
Hmm.
and giving it that just a little bit more of a cooler, kind of a creamier tone to the
Yes.
skin, which again, I was saying Hasselblad, it's like that automatically,
There.
but yeah, you
Yeah.
kind of have to play with it in Nikon. Or again, I can't speak about all cameras, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But
yeah.
it seems like the Nikon cameras, because like you're
Hmm.
shooting Nikon
750.
750,
Hmm.
800, and I've noticed because I test some other ones as well,
Hmm.
and
Okay.
I've seen that everywhere.
Yeah.
So it's kind
Okay.
of the same. Well, I think that's just maybe the way they set up the
Sure.
cameras, and
Hmm.
I also noticed that if you're shooting like you go to Canon, like my eyes were just burning because you can see the colors are different. Because like we used to our cameras too to
Mm,
the color profile,
yes.
and you see, the images we kind of getting used to it, and then you take and I think because we're doing so much retouching, and
Right.
we also spend a lot of time, working on those images, we really see the colors
Yeah.
really. I don't want to say precisely, but we
Right.
see
We
them
just
kind of
get used to, yeah, we
yes,
get used
and
to a
then little
certain.
shift, and
Hmm.
automatically your eyes kind of react to it, right?
Exactly. Yeah, for sure.
Perfect. Okay, let's go to the next one. This is really
Yes.
stunning image.
Thank you. This is actually Donna Maria. She's actually a wonderful photographer as well. She lives in the DC area. And this was actually at a recent workshop I did in Baltimore, and she came
Mhm.
and modeled for me during the workshop. And this was her wardrobe that she brought, and I remember I went to her studio and she asked me, what do you want me to wear? And again, I'm like, I don't know, let me just look, because for me it was like, let me see what you have and it'll click with me if I see it. She showed me this and I said, that I want you to wear this. And again, I don't know why I didn't have an image in my head. I just saw the color and I thought this would be beautiful on you,
Mhm.
just bring this. And she did. And yeah, and then honestly, I just had her stand there, and because I was teaching other photographers
Mhm.
how to photograph, so this was basically other photographers watching. I took the shot, and then in post processing, that's when I decided, okay, I'm going to add these trees, because this was just a plain background. It was uh, kind of a textured background. It had a little bit of a blue hint to it,
Mhm.
And then during post-processing, that's when I overlaid some different images. I added the sort of the halo in
Mhm.
post-processing. And again, it doesn't really have a special meaning. It was just something I wanted to do in post-processing and creating in the moment. And that's how it came to be.
Perfect.
So
Well, it seems like you creating kind of like this images. It's like you have the base, and then you start kind of building on the top of it different things,
right.
different textures, and the concepts,
Yeah.
which is kind of interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just playing. Like I might overlay an image just to see how it looks,
Mhm.
and then I look at it. I'm like, no, let me try this, and then I see it. I'm like, yes, that's what I want. So yeah, it's very much creating as I go.
Perfect. Let's go to the next one.
Yeah, this is Mackenzie. This was also a workshop
Hmm.
here in my at the workshop or the studio I work in here in Colorado, a one-on-one workshop. And she's actually wearing another hat that Teresa created, a different color.
Hmm.
And again, it was she brought the hat. I said, okay, what do I have that would go well with this hat? So I had this really old vintage. I believe it was an old vintage wedding dress that I purchased from another photographer years ago. And I said, "Hey, Mackenzie, can you fit into this dress?" And she put it on. We put the and she has beautiful curly hair naturally. So I told Teresa I want her hair curly, but I want it kind of poofed out with this
Yeah.
hat on. And then I just got this little suitcase. I just had it, and I thought, the colors, as long as the colors kind of coordinate, I thought let's put it together. And that's yeah, I just had her sit down. I took the image, and then I color toned this a little differently. I really desaturated
Mhm.
most of the colors. I kind of almost wanted a monotone, but kind of a, I don't know, like a vintage color that kind of was the main color.
Mhm.
And then the background was actually overlaid. It was an old door I photographed. I don't remember where now. I photographed that door somewhere. I think it was in Louisiana, I believe. And so I overlaid that door in the background there and just kind of uh, blurred it a little bit so it looked like it was further back. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Again, just playing in the moment. Yeah, this is Sesame. She's a local model.
Mhm.
Um, this was actually just she came. We just wanted to play. One day she came in, and yeah, I didn't know what we were gonna do. I had this nice dress. Um, the collar she's wearing is actually just a piece of lace that I found that I had in my box, and I put it on kind of like a
Yeah.
necklace. And I felt like she looked a lot like Sophia Loren,
Mhm.
just a young Sophia Loren. And I had a different hair makeup artist this time, and I wanted to go with heavier eyes because I don't normally do that. My
Mhm.
makeup is usually pretty subtle, but I wanted, because we were just playing that day, I thought let's do something
Mhm.
different. So we did darker eyes. And then the background is just like that. It's a floral background I got from a company. And that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, no.
But also, what I want to point it out here, like, when you mentioned, like, oh, I had this little piece here, and sometimes one little detail can completely
Mm.
shift the image towards
Oh yeah.
completely different direction, right?
Yes.
Just
Yeah.
adding one element can change the dynamic of the picture.
Yeah. And I didn't want like just a basic necklace.
Hmm.
But I just, the dress was this very gold colored dress. And I remembered that I had this gold lace in my box. And I thought, oh, let's put that on. And then I had her take the straps down and just give me, an expression of, longing, or, some,
Hmm.
give me some different expressions. And so after culling, when I saw this and her hand in that position, I just thought, this, and she's not looking at the camera.
Yes.
So yeah, it's just, again,
Good
it's
playing
just,
around, right?
what's that?
It's like a playing with different ideas. And
Yeah, yeah. Let's play. Give me some different expressions. And when I have the models or even the clients change something, it's very, very subtle. I mean, instead of having your hand here, turn it tiny bit, this little, just, move your head this much. I mean,
yeah,
it's just tiny, tiny.
yeah.
So even just little tiny micro changes makes a difference.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I've learned that as well, especially for headshots. Like one tiny move can change completely
Mm-hmm.
the image. It's
Yeah.
fascinating, but like, and also I think we see those things because we keep shooting and we see kind of
Right.
like those
Oh
details.
yeah.
But an average person has no clue, right? They
Right.
think, you know,
Right.
why do I have to just like slightly move my head? Like, what difference does it make? It's gonna
Yes.
make a huge difference.
Yeah. See, and you notice those tiny, tiny little changes. The more you do it, you'll
Mhm.
realize it. And yeah, and sometimes, I have her, and that's one of my creative sessions. That's what I'm doing is like, put your hand here. I take a couple shots and I look at, no, that doesn't look right. Try this.
Mhm.
So yeah, you just kind of start to learn what
What
looks
works?
right and what doesn't. Yeah, what works and what doesn't. Mhm.
Absolutely. Okay, let's jump to the next one.
Yeah, this is Alex. Let's see. This was also a workshop that I taught, and loved the red hair. So I had seen some inspiration online for like kind of sort of bizarre hairstyles, and so Teresa, again, she's very good with hair. I said, I just want a big bun, and then I bought these little balls. I'm not even sure what they're called, but they just look like they're made out of twine or something. And I said, I want to incorporate somehow these balls in her hair, if you can create sort of this, not so much symmetry, but, a bun and then this ball. I just kind of want that incorporated. So that's what she came up with. And then we kind of played with how many do we want in her hair. She would put some in, I'd look at it and, say, no, let's change it up a little bit. And then she was holding one. So yeah, pretty simple. And I loved the brown tone, so I had a little brown dress for her to wear.
Mhm.
The bun, actually, in Photoshop, I did pop it out more because it was
Mhm.
a little bit smaller. So I made the bun a bit bigger, and yeah, overlaid some textures overall on the whole image.
Mhm.
And yeah, that's basically how it came to be. And I tend to desaturate
Mhm.
from what's coming into the camera. So and again, had to desaturate the reds. She's a redhead, so her skin was very pink. So I
Mhm.
wanted to kind of go a different way and get more yellows in her skin or more browns. So I have to play with that. And then I usually desaturate the whole image, and then in the end, I'll resaturate
Mhm.
particular areas. So I wanted to get her hair really more saturated and maybe her lips, but the rest I wanted a little bit
Mhm.
more
It's
muted.
fascinating for me, like when we as a photographers, we kind of have a subject or client, and we just look at them and we analyzing, the skin color, the hair
Mm-hmm.
color, everything is kind of like just paying attention to all those details, right? Where like even people who like looking at themselves, they don't pay attention to those things, right?
Right.
What we do,
Yeah.
which just
Yeah.
seems interesting.
Yep. Mm-hmm. For sure.
Perfect. Let's go to this one. This is really interesting one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is Brienne again. She was the tree image at the beginning there.
Mhm.
This was just another time we came into play, and I'm not sure. I mean, I really just wanted to get, I don't know, just some simple images with this necklace that I had that was going down her back. And with her red hair, I wanted sort of that green, that contrast with the green background. And then in Photoshop, I just decided, I found this pretty painting of these roses or peonies, I guess. And I just wanted to put them on her like a tattoo or something. So yeah, I overlaid the flowers, and I found another image of a hummingbird, and
Mhm.
I overlaid that onto her shoulder there. So again, it was just me playing, just seeing what would come out of it. And yeah, and it turned out pretty nice. And I added some textures again, like I usually do. So yeah, that's all it was, is just playing and seeing what I could come up with.
Well, you did pretty good on this.
Thank you.
Okay, and our last image, let's talk about this one.
Yes, this one was kind of popular. This is Johnny. He's actually a very, very good photographer in Denver. Um, he does a lot of fashion editorial type photography.
Mhm.
And he came in to, to play, and just, I love his tattoos and I just love his look. He's amazing both in front of the camera and behind the camera. So he's fun to photograph. And yeah, just it was just one of those times where, hey, Johnny, and he has really cool wardrobe and jewelry, and he brought some things, and actually this is what he wore when he came to the studio. And I said,
Mm-hmm.
just sit down there. I want to, just let me get a shot of you. And that's really all it was. Is he sat there, I got this shot, and then later in post processing, I added the sort of the halo and then the clouds. Those were clouds I photographed before,
Mm-hmm.
and just retouched it in just a creative way that just
You like it, yeah.
I just did on my own in the flow, and I called him and I titled this "Modern Day Saint."
Mm-hmm.
'Cause, you don't see saints with tattoos and things like that, so I thought it was just kind of fitting with the halo, and he's
Mm-hmm.
such a wonderful human being, so I thought, hey, let's dub it that title. And I did enter it in some competitions, and it got a pretty good score at WPPI. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so it's just a fun image. Yeah, a lot of people have talked about it, and Johnny,
Yes.
he says he likes it too, so it's nice. Yeah, and
Well,
it's
I
beautiful
think,
printed. I have it
yeah.
printed, and it's gorgeous printed. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Mhm.
It's really outstanding. Like,
Thank
well,
you.
those are the images where you can kind of you can't go by them and don't, they just catch your attention, right? And you
Mhm.
have to stop. And I think that's what is amazing about, the photographers who are at that level like you are, that you're creating images where you cannot just kind of scroll by and just move to the next one. You got to
Mhm.
stop and you got to
Mhm.
analyze it. You have to look
Mhm.
closer. It's like a piece of art, right?
Mhm.
Which
Yeah,
is
thank you. And a lot of it is who you're photographing, because Johnny
amazing.
is so um, oh, he's so charismatic, and just
Yeah.
he just draws you in anyway. So just and then capturing his eyes and just his expression, and that's just who he is. And so yeah, you almost have to stop and look, even if it wasn't like edited in a creative way. He's just he's amazing to look at. So yeah, and again, I added some grain and just gave it that sort of film painty quality to it. So yeah.
Absolutely. Perfect. Okay, so
Mm.
we passed the time, so I don't
Okay.
want to. You see, we could
Yeah, it
talk
was kind
more.
of fun. Yeah. Okay, keep going. Right.
Absolutely. So my last question to you is, what advice you would give to someone who is starting, portrait photography as an experienced photographer with a lot of success on your hands? What would you say to someone like, they're starting off,
Mhm.
and what one of advice you would give it to that person?
Well, I would say, photograph what you love, stick to what you love to photograph, and don't follow trends. A lot of new photographers think, oh, lifestyle photography is what everybody wants, so that's what I'm going to do.
Mhm.
Or, whatever, fashion, or, if that's what you love, then great. But, don't follow trends. Just find your own voice, find your own style, because eventually, you will be known for that style. So one of the biggest compliments I ever received was the first time someone said, I knew that was your photo before I saw the name.
Mhm.
So, once you find your own style, you become known for that. And that's a big deal, because that's yours. You created that, instead of copying or following trends. And it's okay to get inspiration, but having your own style is really important. And just do what you love. And also, again, don't feel like you have to buy the latest and greatest equipment to make nice photographs, because you could do it with natural a window. You could create beautiful portraits. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
It's
Mm.
interesting because that advice comes from everyone who I'm talking to.
Oh,
Don't
really?
buy. Yes, everyone said that, but I
Yeah.
think I think we all go through that process, especially
Hmm.
when we at the beginning, because we
Hmm.
think that the equipment will do the job for us, but it's
Hmm.
all the opposite, right? Like
Yeah.
we have
Yeah.
to do the job. But it's
Yeah. I
it's
mean,
it's
it's
really important message to send to people so they
yeah.
understand. Don't follow that trap because it's not going to take you where you
Right.
want to go, right?
And of course, as you get better, more successful, and you're making money, sure, you can buy a better camera, better lights, but but you don't have to do it all at once. You can
Yeah.
grow with what you have, learn how to master it, and at some point you will outgrow what
Mhm.
you're using, and then you'll know when it's time to upgrade. But I mean, you could use the same stuff for years and it's fine. And
Yes.
also another piece of advice, if someone is wanting to do this as a business, to not to treat it as a hobby. If you really want to make a business and make a living, you have to price yourself
Mhm.
and value your work and price yourself where you can make a living. There's too many times that the industry has been devalued because
Mhm.
beginners or even people who've been doing it for a while consider themselves hobbyists, and maybe they'll charge $100 for 500 photos, and then what happens is that clients start to think, if you do charge what you're worth, why are you so expensive? So and so only charges $50, but
Mhm.
and then it starts to devalue the industry. So if you really want to do this as a living, then price yourself as if your livelihood depends on it. So and that'll help everybody, all
Yes.
photographers. Yeah.
It's a great advice, and I think
Hmm.
people have to hear that because
Hmm.
yeah, it's. But again, I think the problem is especially those ones who are getting in, right? Like just the fact they're getting clients for them is exciting, right? And that's like
Hmm.
whatever they
Hmm.
pay, I'll take it. But with the
Right.
time, like we need to change
Yeah.
the mentality and approach, and just make sure
Right.
that people value what we do, right? So.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, for sure. I mean, when you're first starting, yeah, you need to start somewhere,
Mhm.
but make sure
With the
it's just for limited time, and
absolutely
yeah, yeah. Mhm.
perfect. Thank you
Mhm.
so much. That
Yeah,
was
thank you.
That was real pleasure chatting with you. Thank you for all the advice and tips and sharing your knowledge. That's amazing. I
Appreciate
always
it.
love to hear from photographers like you because they have this amazing experience, and then that's I think we're also living in the great times where people can openly talk about it and
Hmm.
share it. Because
Yeah,
you remember back in the days, nobody would say a
I
word about
know.
this,
Yeah,
how they
I
work and what
remember.
they do.
I
Nowadays, it's
remember when I was learning or doing landscape photography, I went to a talk from a very well-known landscape photographer. And at the end, I came up to him and just wanted to introduce myself and ask him a couple of questions. And he totally like blew me off. And it was awful. And I was so, deflated after that. And yeah, it was. And then after that, I had a totally different view of that person. Like I no longer really looked up to him.
yeah.
So yeah, it makes a difference how you present yourself to others, and how open you are, and yeah, and it's great to connect and learn from each other.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Well, I think we all had this, like especially the photographers who've been in this industry for quite a bit. Like I had similar
Mhm.
experiences, like when I asked some basic questions and
Yeah,
they just, I don't even want to talk to you.
right.
Like,
Like you're beneath me. I don't want to talk to
yes, don't even get close to me. Yeah, I'm not
you.
going to share
Right.
it. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
well, I'm glad those, the attitude is changing because people, I
Yes.
think, more and more open, and but I also think, and I'm sure you agree with me, just because you could share all your knowledge, it still takes time to practice. It still takes
Hmm.
time to
Hmm.
learn this stuff. It's not
Yeah.
just because someone tells you something then automatically you will know how to do it, but just doing
Right.
it, this is another story, right? So
Oh, and during my workshops, for example, we're all photographing the same person. We have the same lights, and all the images will look different
yeah,
because everyone has a different approach. You can take the tools you learn and just use them to your advantage, and come up with your own way of, or your own style, your own voice using the tools that you have. Yeah.
absolutely.
Hmm.
Perfect. I'm not going to take more of your time.
No
I
worries. Thank
think
you.
we should do that. We will do it this conversation at some point again. I would love to
Sure.
chat with you again. I think
Yeah,
we have lots of to talk about. So
that'd be
thank you
great.
again for your
Thank
time.
you.
I will link to this podcast, all your information, so people can check out what you do. As I
Yeah.
said, it's a really inspiring work. I'm sure a lot of people already know you. So like, yeah,
Thank you.
your work is known on social media and all those platforms. So yeah, thank you so much. Have a
Appreciate it.
fantastic rest of the week, and thank you again for accepting the invitation and finding the time to talk to me.
Of
I
course.
truly
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.